the actual number of Bitcoin products and services in Bitcoin is growing exponentially just because the number of services that you can provide is growing as the network grows, and it's just Lightning micropayments enables that.
Imagine if you're going to go out to a new restaurant for the first time. What is something that you do? Besides looking at maybe maps to figure out how long it's going to take you to get there, you and the person you're going out with, or your friends, or whoever it is, even if you're just going by yourself, you're probably going to take that extra 5 to 10 seconds to look at Yelp or look at a Google review. Because even though I don't know the other people that have gone to this restaurant, if a restaurant has more than 500 reviews and higher than 4.5 stars, for me, that's an easy way to say, this restaurant's pretty good. The food that they make and the service that they provide for their patrons must be pretty good. And on this episode, I get to talk with Tom from Hey Apollo about this similar idea. The idea that consumer-driven insights, when provided to a business by a large amount of people, will really help that business to be able to improve their product or service. And on this episode, we look at the other side and we talk about the person who is going to be leaving the review or leaving the testimonial or leaving the feedback or consumer-driven insight. Because what Hey Apollo does, the company that Tom helped to co-found, they're paying people in sats for their opinions, their reviews, their testimonials, which is a really cool idea. The future of Bitcoin for me is fascinating when we get into the idea of micropayments. Remember that each Bitcoin is broken down into 100 million Satoshis, or as we'll call them on the episode, sats. These sats provide a whole new incentive system to be able to provide businesses with consumer-driven insights like never before. So let's dive into the future of micropayments and consumer-driven insights. I'm Jarrett Carpenter, and this is More Than Blockchain. Tom, welcome to More Than Blockchain. How are you?
I'm doing good, Jared. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for hopping on. And I actually don't know the answer to this question, at least I don't think. Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling in from Melbourne in Australia. That's actually where I live.
Oh, for some reason. And for some reason, I thought you were in the United States. I don't know why. In my head, it was like New York, but maybe am I crazy?
Well, where Apollo is like all distributed in the States, and I was actually in Miami a couple of weeks ago, so you might have seen me post about that or something. But no, I'm from Melbourne, Australia.
Okay, cool. Yeah, you're not the first or the last Aussie. There are a lot of people tied into crypto and Bitcoin that are from Australia, and it's been great to kind of connect with them. And I didn't realize that you were on the other part of the planet, and so thank you for whatever time it is for recording. Before we get going, and normally I actually leave this to the end because I don't know, maybe I'm not the best podcaster, but before we get going, when did you get into Bitcoin? How did that happen? What year? What was the moment? And then I also want you to be very honest, Tom, because I want to know if you've ever owned anything other than Bitcoin. That's one of my questions too.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, Bitcoin was like required a lot of touch points. I got academically interested in Bitcoin almost 10 years ago. When I was at university, I spent like 6 months studying it. I was really interested in it, but this was in 2014. But I didn't buy it at the time, and I was more interested in it I was kind of studying like the mathematical properties of the distribution, just because it was this thing we'd basically never seen before, and just in terms of its volatility, and that was interesting to me. And at the time, I had what was probably like, it's kind of amusing to go back and read my views on it at the time, because I kind of looked at it sort of like a payment network, or almost like a replacement of Visa, in a way that probably, to be honest, a lot of the big blockers look at Bitcoin like today. That was kind of how I was thinking about it back then. And I was sort of, my actual conclusion at the time was, well, look, this will sort of, the success or not will kind of depend on whether merchants take it up. and what I failed to appreciate was that actually the value of the thing that made Bitcoin special wasn't that it was this new payment network. It was that it was actually a whole new kind of value in itself. That was what I missed at the time, and it took me probably a few more years after that until I really, well, 2017 came along, and that was when it sort of essentially just proved wrong. I was like, okay, I watched Bitcoin go from 300 start rocketing up, and it's like, okay, I need to reassess some of my assumptions that I previously held. So I probably started buying more in 2017, 2018, but I've been thinking about it for a long time.
But that's still really cool though that you were academically, or I should say like philosophically, or maybe even intellectually curious about it almost 10 years ago. And when was that? Are we talking 2013, 2012 in university?
13, 14. Yeah.
It's funny you say that, and I don't think I've ever actually shared this. So, more than blockchain, we cover everything. Anything that has to do with the blockchain-backed ecosystems, I call it. So, you have NFTs, you have DAOs, you have Bitcoin, you have dApps, we have people, fractionalizing real estate, everything under the sun. People have come on who are CPAs, who are helping people do their taxes. We've had lawyers come on. And one of the things I don't think I've ever shared is I found out about Bitcoin in 2014, 2015 when I was doing grad work. So, around the same time. But I was not intellectually curious about it at all. I just would kind of like say, "Oh, unless you accept Bitcoin," like at bars as like a joke. I've never admitted that until today, but it kind of aligns with the timeline because then in 2017, that's when I first bought. I took some US dollars and I put them into an ATM and I scanned my phone and I was like, "That's weird. I've never done this before." And then it just all started, it all started to go down the hill and the rabbit hill and the rabbit hole. And here we are today. And okay, it used to be like the mathematical equation of it, but can you speak to me just a little bit more about the uniqueness maybe after 2017? Because I think that that's something that maybe is lost on people when they first look at it.
Once again, I mean, look, for me, the thing is that I would consider myself somewhat lucky because I was well into Bitcoin before I frankly fully understood Bitcoin. Or that's an understatement. I didn't really understand a Bitcoin at all. I got into Bitcoin simply because it's just a good asymmetric investment opportunity. Basically, I looked at it back then and was like, well, this thing could 10x, or it could halve, but that's a good bet. That was as basic as my thinking was really, in 2017. I was still a little bit more skeptical, as I said, from my earlier studies in 2014. But over time, as I started to actually go down the rabbit hole and dig deep and understand a few important things, really, which is one is that Bitcoin is this discovery of digital scarcity, and you can't actually you can never replace it because it is it's sort of oxymoronic to even try and replicate Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a thing that cannot be replicated. That was the discovery of Satoshi Nakamoto, to create the thing that cannot be replicated. So it will never be replaced by an altcoin, in my opinion. And that was a very big light bulb moment for me. And then realizing that actually it's this open source network. And so when people talk about, yeah, but there's this technology growth, and what happens when we have these new ideas in 30 years, 50 years, 100 years' time, and we want to have something better, whatever that better means. Well, the thing is that whatever that better is, that will be Bitcoin. So we might have better money in 100 years' time. I think we probably will. But that will be evolving and advancing Bitcoin into this better money. So this whole concept, it's just a new paradigm shift to actually fully appreciate the concept of these open source networks and the fact that they actually do improve over time. And so there's no disruption when it comes to replacing it. It's simply improving it by building on it, or building it itself on the base layer. And the other thing I would say is that over time, I got to appreciate some of the more philosophical aspects of Bitcoin. particularly the importance of freedom. This wasn't something that was so immediately obvious to me in, say, 2017, 2018. But look, as I mentioned earlier, I live in Melbourne, Australia, and it became really obvious the value of freedom over the last few years when frankly it was just taken away from us in with the lockdowns and the COVID experience, and the ability to have something that cannot be stolen from you is exceptionally rare. In fact, there's nothing like it. And so that was another element to the piece of the puzzle which makes Bitcoin so unique and so attractive to me.
That's super well said. And you have a soundbite in there that I'm probably going to steal because I think it's perfect. So thank you for saying all that. And talking about Bitcoin, and you're saying, yeah, in 30 or 40 years, what's going to be better is Bitcoin. And it's going to be because you're going to be building on it. And one of the things that's happened from when you and I started in 2017 to probably invest and just, take a little bit more of our time and energy and focus on it to now has been Lightning. And I know Lightning is pretty fundamental to how Hey Apollo works. So I want to shift right now into Hey Apollo and talk about how that was founded. And you are a co founder with that. And I see on the bottom of heyapollo.com, which we will shout out, we can shout out all of that stuff at the end. You yourself, Julian, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Sahil, you guys,
Yeah.
okay, perfect. You guys founded Hey Apollo. How long ago did you found it? And was it also a thing where you kind of need, like, it wouldn't have been possible without Lightning? Or do you think you could have done it without Lightning?
Firstly, so we started Apollo about a year ago with a with an interest and focus on Bitcoin education and really wanting to move the needle in terms of Bitcoin adoption in any way we can. And to answer your second point, there is simply no way we could run Apollo without the Lightning Network. What does make the Lightning Network so powerful is these global instant payments, instant settlements at zero cost to people all over the world. And it enables a whole kind of new value transactions that are simply not possible with Bitcoin. Now, prior like without the Lightning Network, of course, you can try and use other cryptocurrencies to enable these sort of micro transactions, which is what a lot of sort of Web3 companies have done. The problem is that nobody values the random token you've created to send that transaction. So what's special is actually being able to send a micro transaction in a currency that somebody actually values. and that's brand new, and that's what Lightning enables. So yeah, hope that answers your
Yeah,
question.
that totally does. And I looked at it and I was like, uh, there's no way they can't do this without Lightning, right? It's kind of like this story with James Cameron. He had the idea for Avatar for 20 or 30 years, but he couldn't do it because he didn't have the tech. He finally was able to do it, launched it in 2010, but he had the idea for years. And it's almost like, so thinking about that with you, Julian and Sahil, how long before you launched did you have the idea? And are you all Bitcoin maxis? I'm calling you a maxi. You can tell me if I'm wrong. Are you all Bitcoin maxis, or was it just exactly what you said? This was the thing that makes the most sense that we know people are going to want.
Yeah, look, so I mean, we're all Bitcoin maxis, and it was a learning process for ourselves. I won't say it's the kind of we didn't have this idea for years going into it. But as we started to go down the rabbit hole of Lightning and Bitcoin, we realized that, because it's new for us as well, too, right? It's new for the world and it's new for us. And we're like, as we started doing our own research into Lightning, because it is this, it's a fascinating technology in the way that it completely changes it potentially changes the way we operate and communicate with each other. The opportunity for these automated microtransactions that's never actually existed before is extremely interesting. And it's like, well, what kind of businesses does this enable that never existed before? And then when you kind of think about how this works in the context of a world in which information, we want to be able to put value on information when artificial intelligence and computers are making information sort of, in one sense, go to zero because it's like immediately replicable information is out there. Like you can ask a AI for to give you an answer for so many different things and actually like replicate it or get these massive data streams. But how to actually get value from human to human information and put time value of that to incentivize people to actually want to, in our case, use our site, but basically just communicate knowledge that they have with other people. And so that was kind of where we got excited about like the Lightning Network and how that offers an interesting opportunity for us. And then it kind of just tied in really nicely with our other objective, which is sort of more of a basic, hey, we want to help just Bitcoin discovery. We want to help people discover and compare Bitcoin products in the industry because, if you look back on 2022, it was kind of a watershed moment about people discovering, hey, what kind of things can we trust? Before, if you look in the sort of the 2 years coming into 2022, probably people had too much trust in a lot of products that they shouldn't have, and that really hurt a lot of folks. And so it's like, how do we help separate signal from the noise? And that was kind of one of our goals, and also recognizing that Bitcoin is this decentralized network, which is it is a network in itself, but also it's a decentralized rabbit hole. There's no one source of, if look, if you want to find out about like Solana or something, the Solana Foundation has probably got a website where they can put up like, here's everything you need to know about. Bitcoin doesn't work that way. There's nobody that runs it. There's nobody that controls it. But so we needed to like just try and create a bit of a directory of resources for people. And there are other directories that exist in other contexts, sort of educational contexts, like James Lopp has, a tremendous directory of resources, but we thought we could provide a new angle focusing on the products and services in the industry because, as well, it's, as I was saying with the Lightning, the actual number of Bitcoin products and services in Bitcoin is growing exponentially just because the number of services that you can provide is growing as the network grows, and it's just Lightning micropayments enables that.
Yeah, I'm on the website right now, and I was very interested at all of the different kind of categories you have where you can go on and review. And I'm just gonna, for people at home, I'm gonna go ahead and read it, and then I hope everyone hops on the website. But you have Noster, exchanges, hardware wallets, mobile wallets, nodes, finance, newsletters, desktop wallets, rewards, social, custody services, games and miscellaneous services, conferences, merch, and hosted mining. And the one I wanted to ask you about, because when I read through this and yesterday when I was like, okay, I got Tom coming on, I need to know a little bit more about Hey Apollo, the social. Can you talk to me about some of the products that come through there? Because I think that is, we are social creatures. We're social human beings. Like this is what we do. And
Yeah.
when Bitcoin plays a part of that, I think that's a really cool thing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that there's a couple of like, there's a bunch of companies in that category, but I think two ones that stand out to me. One is we've got this Stack of News, which you might be familiar with. It's kind of a Lightning integrated. Well, it's a play on hack, but I think about it like it's almost like a Lightning Reddit, basically, or that's where it's going. I think right now it's heavily you're going to go there, read about Bitcoin news, and interact with people. But I think where it's headed is going to be a sort of a Lightning Reddit, which I think is really interesting. It's very and in a lot of ways, by the way, Stack of News was certainly like an inspiration for Apollo, just in the way people interact, and it's that value for value type of interaction where you make a post on that, and if somebody likes what you post, they will send you sats as a reward, like putting some actual economic value behind, like just as a show of appreciation for what you've offered them. And then another social category is this Orange Pill app, which you might be familiar with. They're another, like, just a great up and coming Bitcoin company that basically incentivize sort of Bitcoin meetups or tell people to meet with each other. They kind of flirt with the idea of being a dating app. I'm not sure if like it's. I think it's kind of an interesting one for them. I think people like using it as a dating app, but I'm not sure if like I don't think they actually wanted it to be a dating app. And it's like, well, are we a dating app? I'm not really sure. I mean, in some ways it is, but then also it's probably more like sort of just like interacting with other Bitcoiners. And they have some cool features like being able to, like their own wallet integrations and things to send people sats on their app. But the broader point is, as you're saying, like with these categories, they're kind of designed so that there's going to be a lot more companies and products that jump into these categories over time, because there's just so many opportunities for people to build. I mean, it's just basically building any kind of value business, but then centering it around, or frankly just taking advantage of Bitcoin. And Apollo, on two levels, right? We're Bitcoin related because we pay our users in Sats. So that's like an incentive model for using it. But then obviously as well, it's the discovery for Bitcoin products and services. But the truth is that we don't like Apollo could be Apollo without even being around Bitcoin products, right? It could just be incentivizing interactions and a value for value people to write information and then paying them, rewarding them in Bitcoin for their efforts. So there's going to be a lot of, we are like very self-referential in that sense, but Bitcoin businesses don't have to be. They don't actually have to be about, it doesn't even have to be about Bitcoin, frankly. It can be just using Bitcoin because it's an extremely valuable tool. Like it happens to be extremely useful to be able to send these like payments to globally in a way that you could never do that before. And that's what I see really exploding in the future, is frankly just using the Lightning Network, because it's like great, and it's a useful tool for any business, even if like I think what we will succeed when people, what we'll know will have really landed when people are building these kind of Bitcoin based businesses and they're not even ideologically aligned with Bitcoin. They're just using it because it's a great product and service. I happen to believe in the Bitcoin mission, and well, in my view of a Bitcoin mission, I want to end central banking. I mean, I do, but you don't have to believe any of that, right? You can just want to use micropayments to be able to send money to people in Africa and Asia and Europe instantly at no cost, because hey, there's a lot of utility in that and it offers new opportunities for you as a business. So I think that when we start getting more of those kind of businesses popping up in the industry, that's when you start getting this like massive wave of adoption where, look, people don't necessarily have to be well versed and well read in Austrian economics to want to, use Bitcoin. They just do it because it's valuable.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And that was actually something that was, I'm part of another live show called Not Crypto Bros. And that was a conversation we were having yesterday, because on that show with the other two guys, I'm kind of like the resident maxi. And I was already just saying that many people around the world who are part of the Bitcoin community, and even if they're not, maybe they live in El Salvador, they're already just starting to think in sats. And once you start to do that, things get interesting. And I can totally see an adoption point, a vector, where the three of you are like, oh, yeah, people are just building companies now and they're just using Bitcoin because it's the thing that everyone wants globally. And it's not like, if you and I start a lemonade stand, we're not going to call it a fiat lemonade stand. We're just going to accept pesos or dollars or whatever, fiat, whatever we have. And so I can totally see that future. And I love how the Orange Pill app, because I was reading even just yesterday about how when YouTube started, it was supposed to be a dating app. And it is now not a dating app, as we know. But it's interesting how things start and where they progress to. So with that, like, where is Hey Apollo now, and where do you think it's going to go?
Well, I think right now we are essentially becoming the place to find and discover Bitcoin products and source, and from within the industry, it's we just the most convenient place to source customer testimonials about your products and services. I mean, it's kind of getting back to what was talking about a moment ago, I think apart from our actual affiliation with, sort of being in the Bitcoin industry, and that's all nice, but I think that a lot of companies are going to like the selling point or the value that we provide them is that we're actually just frankly really good at sourcing customer testimonials for products because people really value being paid in sats. It's actually very simple. Like just a total value for value exchange where in any other world you're asking them to take the time out of their day to write you a review, write you customer testimonials, write you product feedback, and it's just kind of, hey, please, will you do it? And then in another world, you can say, we'll actually pay you for your time. And on that specific point, the two things I would say is that this has been studied in the literature that people actually respond to economic incentives when it comes to surveys, political surveys, or company feedback, and this kind of thing. And putting aside the literature, in practice we found the same thing actually when we partner with companies and try and source reviews for them, which is to say we just encourage them to invite their users to come to Apollo and write a review. They find that they get a really high conversion rate, and the reason is because they're offering sats to them, which is just value to the user. Now, my thesis is that in the future, and it's not something that we're doing today, but in the future, this is something that can be extended to outside the Bitcoin industry, still focused on Bitcoin from our perspective in terms of we want to be putting Bitcoin in the hands of as many people as possible. We want to be onboarding people to the Bitcoin network, onboarding people to the Lightning network. But the way I see it is that we can be partnering with software companies or lots of different companies outside of the very specific Bitcoin industry. And we can say to them, hey, why don't you source reviews for your products on Apollo? And they might not care about Bitcoin in the slightest, but what I think they will care about is just frankly having a higher conversion rate of being able to activate their customers and getting them to provide feedback and provide customer testimonials, all these things that are really valuable for businesses. And I think that they'll find that it's actually really useful to use us because they want to partner with or provide just an easy way to access the Lightning network, and just actually that it's really like people will like being paid in Bitcoin, even if they're not Bitcoiners. And I think that it's massively underestimated how many people in the world that are open to being paid in Bitcoin. Because it is true today that it's a relatively small proportion of people that want to say, take their bank account and convert it to Bitcoin. It's a small fraction of the world. There's no doubt about that. But Bitcoin has this massive, magnificent brand. It has been in the news constantly for a decade. Just about everybody in the world has heard of Bitcoin, is familiar with Bitcoin. And while people, like regular people, might not necessarily be at the point where they want to exchange their fiat money for Bitcoin, my thesis is that a lot of people will be open and very willing and excited about receiving Bitcoin as a proposition for them. And so I see that happening in the future where more companies are essentially onboarded to the Bitcoin network where, and by that I mean specifically they're using Bitcoin to source reviews, source customer feedback, source just a better relationship with their clients, and incentivizing the model by paying them in Bitcoin or paying them in sats to have this relationship. And they don't necessarily care about Bitcoin from any kind of ideological or philosophical reasons. They're just doing it because it's by far the best payment network to actually do this. I mean, it's just simply not possible to kind of have this relationship with a global client base, or really, frankly, inconvenient to try and do this even on fiat payment rails, even domestically, say within the United States. It's just not. There's nothing that quite replicates like the Lightning Network's ability to, hey, just download this wallet and we can send it to you straight away. And so I see a lot of companies. I see Apollo eventually partnering with other companies to use Bitcoin in that way. With that said, that's more of a medium term vision for myself right now. Like right now, I'm most interested in focusing on the Bitcoin industry as a whole because there's still like a lot more Bitcoin companies that Apollo can partner with right now. But that's where I see us going, maybe somewhere down the track.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you actually went exactly where I was going to go because this seems like an incentive model that people outside of Bitcoin would totally hop on board. And so, just a hypothetical, I come to you, I'm like, hey, Tom, I've got this company. I sell a SaaS product. So that way, at least it's global. And, I can't be receiving euros and pesos and dollars and yuan. And I just want to receive one thing. And I see that you're working with Bitcoin. A lot of people are aware of that. How easy is it for someone, for a customer who has just bought my SaaS product to go on to Hey Apollo and get paid in Bitcoin? How many steps are we talking? This is assume that this is also a person who is not Bitcoin literate, has no idea what this is, but people just love getting, like you said, that extra little incentive goes a very, very, very long way.
The only thing that a user needs, they do need a Lightning wallet. Now, this is where we're extremely lucky to have someone like Jack because the Cash App, say in America in particular, everybody has a Cash App, or it's extremely like the adoption of that is extremely high, and there's a Lightning address just sitting in the Cash App right there. So, an enormous proportion of America already has a Lightning wallet on their phone. But even if they don't, it's simple enough to provide instructions to go ahead and download one. I mean, people are familiar with downloading an app, and this is the kind of thing as well that's getting like easier by the day. It's constantly coming out new. I'm a big fan of Albi, the internet browser mobile wallet, but certainly, I mean, even some of the wallets that have been around for a little bit, like Wallet of Satoshi it's just a great UI UX for onboarding somebody new to Bitcoin. So look, I think that there's a lot of different ways we can pretty easily get Bitcoin into the hands of people that are not like really familiar with it. And it's the way I see it is that getting paid in Bitcoin, if you're like brand new, it's just like step one of the journey, right? In terms of sort of, quote unquote orange pilling someone. It's not the kind of thing that, you send them $5 worth of Bitcoin and then they're like, all right, let me set up my multi-sig for my savings account now. It doesn't work that way. But it is like just part of the journey, and I see it as if we can send Sats and put it in the hands of as many people as possible, and I think that's materially moving the needle on adoption.
I completely agree. And actually, there was something that I saw today that I was like, oh, this is perfect. I want to bring it up and ask Tom what his numbers are. So let's go back to the hypothetical of my SaaS products, right? And let's say I have 100 customers.
Hmm.
What's your conversion rate compared to non Satoshi incentives, if that makes sense? Like percent wise, of 100 customers, how many will opt in to Hey Apollo as opposed to not because there's not sats?
I will say that we haven't done enough testing to be really confident about the knots. Like just because we haven't really done enough of the A/B testing on, frankly, not offering like we pay people in Sats, and so we found that that's got a really high conversion rate. I mean, it does obviously depend on who's making the request and how they're making the request. Obviously, if it's coming from a trusted source versus for somebody you're unfamiliar with. End of the day, when you're sending an email out, somebody has to click a link, and it depends on who's asking. So that makes a big difference. But it's something that I definitely want to do more as we kind of investigate. I can see us doing a lot more of that. But the one thing I will say is that there are kind of two different. We have done some testing on the how do people respond to different levels of Sats, which is kind of there is a sort of it has a kind of an interesting property where it doesn't make huge amount of difference, I would say. If you're offering a very small economic value in sats, then whether or not you offer 100 sats or 200 sats to somebody probably doesn't make a huge amount of difference to them. It will get a boost when you're talking to Bitcoiners. That kind of thing will get a boost because in terms of activating them, because it's almost like a signal rather than economic value. It's like you're showing value to me. It's like a way of saying I appreciate you. And so it's like a really great thank you in a way. And for that, people kind of activate for it. And it's a little bit like getting a like on Twitter or Facebook or something where people really enjoy that, but doesn't actually like whether or not, you put up a post and whether you got likes on it doesn't actually make a difference, right? But people still enjoy it. And I think that there is an element of that where even a small amount of sats makes a difference in terms of activating people. But the one thing I will say is that it definitely does make a difference in the conversion, and a surprisingly high difference, I would say. If you can offer people like, say, 3,000, 5,000 sats versus maybe 1,000 sats, and you'd say, well, hey, look, end of the day, what's the difference? We're talking about $1. That's what we're talking about here. And yet it does seemingly activate people in a pretty interesting way in terms of materially high conversion rates for paying a $1, basically, which is interesting as well because I wonder if that I wonder if that would still be the case if you were offering them $1. I'm not so sure. I think that maybe people, maybe Bitcoiners in some sense are pricing in, every Bitcoiner sort of on some level thinks that it's all going to be worth, 10, 20, 30 times more at some point in the future. And so there's probably an element of that too, where it's like, yeah, well, you're paying me that might be $50 in 5 years time. So I'm putting a value on that. So yeah, look, we've seen different responses at different sat levels, but we haven't done a lot of testing on the no sats versus 2000 sats.
Yeah, and the reason why I ask is I saw this consensus. CoinDesk had put something out earlier today, and it was an infographic of, I think it was people's bullishness on as to where crypto would be most innovated upon, and 35% was actually in the United States. Obviously, this was pre the last week and a half, which has been not fun for US citizens and for crypto in general. But one of the things was it said, this survey was from 169 attendees. And at consensus, they had 15,000 people. So that's 1.1% of people gave feedback. And that just seems low to me. And so I feel like that's where Hey Apollo steps in and says, hey, CoinDesk, let us help you get some more reviews up there.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, I can tell you though, every interaction we've had is operating in the orders of magnitude higher than that. So if that's the baseline, then I think there's certainly a real opportunity to activate people with Sats. But it definitely, I don't want to overstate the fact that there's no question when you're trying to activate people in sort of like an email marketing, the economic incentive is only ever going to be one piece of it. It's always who's asking, why are you asking? Like, do I actually know you, or did I interact with you 4 years ago and or like, did you buy my email, or do I? So it depends on like the relationship people have with their email list. So that's always part of it. But that's pretty interesting data that you've got there anyway.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. It just seems super low, especially for the amount of people that I feel like in this space in crypto, Web3, and Bitcoin. They just seem willing to help out. And if that's going to be a 5-minute survey, they're like, yeah, I would love to crowdsource my information so that way you can make a better product or service. So I was fairly surprised by that. And hey, Apollo, why? And this is something that I was just thinking about earlier because I was like, okay, the name is Apollo. It's a Greek god. That's pretty much known by people. And then I was like, oh, but what's Apollo a god of? So I did a little Googling. And it says Apollo is a god of practically everything, including but not limited to music, poetry, art, prophecy, truth, archery, plague, healing, sun, and light. Why Apollo? Why the name Apollo? Of all, why not Hey Satoshi? right? Why not like, hey, sailor?
It was something we did spitball around, and it was actually your point about God of the sun, and this was something that we talked about we internally as well, because one of the ideas we kind of think about in Bitcoin is it's energy, and what does that mean? Well, where does all of the energy on planet Earth comes from the sun, ultimately, right? So that was a big part of just like knocking names around, and we also we wanted something that felt it was in part also just an intuitive based thing. It felt right for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like the name. I was just very interested in. And then now I want to shift gears and actually ask you about your Twitter because I want to know who's creating your memes. Does Apollo have its own meme lord? Do you have some intern in Melbourne just churning these things out? Because it's pretty good. I gotta. I can admire a good meme.
Oh, well, I appreciate that. I think it is a probably a consequence of me just being far too online for most of my life, actually.
Yeah, I didn't mean to bring you shame. I just wanted to call it out because every single day I'm on Twitter and I just see all these maxi memes and your your memes are always the best. So I just wanted to call that out. And I don't follow the other two co-founders, but I'm not sure if their meme game is up to yours, but I hope that they're, realizing that they're with hanging out with gods here.
I appreciate that, Jared. I better let them know that. I better let them know you told me
Yeah,
that.
they're gonna hear this and be like, "Did you pay him to say that?"
Yeah.
We're kind of coming to the end here. I'd love to give you a chance to shout out where people can learn more about you. Shout out wherever they can find you, and then also I shouted out in the beginning, but you can talk about the website where people can learn more. And one of the things I also want to plug here is that if you're listening to this and you don't own Bitcoin, you're not into crypto, and you're just like, oh, I know Tom from somewhere, or I know Jared from high school, or whatever, this may be a great entry point for you to get into Bitcoin, get a little bit of it, and just kind of check some things out. So, anyways,
Yeah, appreciate that, Jared. I think just on that point, I mean, I would say if anybody is interested, like just keep following your interest. I mean, I think it's really important to educate yourself. I think it really does help to get some kind of skin in the game, economic incentive to put in the time to actually learn. I mean, it really is a long journey to actually get sort of quote unquote orange pill, but I think it's more than worth it. Just as you mentioned, or as we've kind of talked about, if you want to learn about Bitcoin products and services at heyapollo.com, we have like just a great directory to actually learn about, like find all the a lot of resources in the industry today. And yeah, otherwise, also I'm on Twitter at Thomas_Fahrer, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody if they want to send me a DM. My DMs are open.
yeah, that is excellent. I will throw all of those links in the episode show notes. And Tom, thank you so much for hopping on the pod.
It's been a pleasure, Jared. Thank you.
Thanks for checking out this episode of More Than Blockchain. And to get in touch with Tom or to check out Hey Apollo, check the episode show notes where I'm going to leave a bunch of links. As always, please follow us on social media at More Than Blockchain. And if you don't subscribe to the pod, please subscribe wherever you're listening to, whether that's a podcast platform or on YouTube. And if you enjoyed this episode, please go ahead and share the link with a friend, family member, or colleague. Thanks again for checking out this episode of More Than Blockchain, and I'll see you next time.